Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. I'm Bilal and this is Bilal Reads. So I'm here today because of my July wrap-up. So I managed to read 7 books for the month of July. It was a productive reading month, but it was kind of a disappointing one because out of these books, I didn't really like most of them. I felt like most of them that I read were like kind of filler books that weren't necessarily super terrible, but weren't really great either. So let's get into it. So I started off this month with a reread. I reread Simon versus the Homosapiens Agenda. I actually read this book last year and I loved it a lot. It was super good. It's super funny. It's one of my favorite books. I'm just gonna say that. It was super good. And I reread it because I was going to read Leah on the Offbeat. And I never thought Simon versus the Homosapiens Agenda would ever get a sequel or any sort of follow-up because it was a standalone story. But it's actually a part of a Simon-verse of novels along with this one and then the Upside Down of Unrequited. But I picked up Leah on the Offbeat and I finally got around to reading it. So I didn't really enjoy Leah on the Offbeat as much as I enjoyed Simon versus the Homosapiens Agenda, mainly because the whole blue mystery of like who is blue, will they get together, wasn't there. Instead, this follows Leah's own story, which her story I actually really liked. I liked Leah, I liked her voice a lot. But this story just follows her pining for Abby Soso and is just seeing whether or not they'll get together. So that entire intrigue and the mystery behind like who is behind the email was kind of not even addressed in this book. So it kind of took that suspense out of it. Otherwise, it was a fairly decent contemporary read. The next 2 books I read are also in a series, and that is And I Darken, and then the second book, Now I Rise by Kiersten White. So I actually love these books. I have the third one. I've ordered it, and it's the conclusion to this trilogy, and I normally don't like trilogies, mainly because I rather have a standalone story, but I really, really like these books. They're super cool, they're super unique. So you might have heard of this first one, And I Darken. It came out last year. No, just kidding, it came out 2 years ago. And this book follows a female version of Vlad the Impaler called Lada, and it follows her being sent to Turkey with her younger brother Radu, and her meeting the future Sultan of the Ottoman Empire and how they become close. And I absolutely love these 2 books. They're super good. I could actually see these being made into a TV show. I know this one was marketed as like Game of Thrones for like young adults, but like that's kind of not true at all, and instead I actually prefer this to Game of Thrones. These books are super unique. They're actually like oddly really feminist, and for me especially, it's very unique to find like characters that I can relate to in books. But this book has a lot of diversity. It does take place mainly in the Ottoman Empire, so it does deal with Islam and Christianity a lot, but it's super respectful, it's super unique, and these 2 books I super recommend. The next 3 books I have for you guys are like a part of my library book haul that I did for July. Batman Nightwalker by Mary Lou. So, Mary Lou, I think that's how you pronounce her. Marie Lou, sorry. She is the author of the Legend series, which I read a while back, and this book series, it's the DC Icons, which is where YA authors reimagine like all these famous DC heroes as like book characters. I don't really know. I kind of had like very low expectations for this book series, mainly because the DC movies are kind of really terrible. And surprisingly, this book was decent. It takes place in Gotham City, of course, follows a young Bruce Wayne trying to stop this evil anarchist force called the Nightwalkers. And this book was okay. Like, I didn't hate it. It was a very quick read for me. And it was just kind of, I don't want to say dull or boring, but I thought the story was kind of predictable. But overall, it was pretty decent. So the next 2 books from my library book haul were absolute disappointments. I didn't like them. They didn't work for me, and I don't recommend them to other people. But the first book I have out of those 2 is Tempests and Slaughter by Tamora Pierce. So I've seen some people review this book on BookTube. I'll link their videos down below. But I mainly got this because the cover is really pretty. I hope y'all can see that. But the cover is really pretty, and it's set in this like magical boarding school, which kind of like sounds like a Harry Potter book, but it completely isn't. And it follows this these three friends' journey from their youth, so when they're like 11 or to 12 years old, to when they become like almost adults, they reach the age of 17 over the course of this book. And this is, I didn't know this going in, but this book takes place in a already established world. It's called the Tortall universe, which has like 20 other books almost published in it, which I didn't know. So I thought this book was kind of confusing in its description of magic. It was also really boring because this book had no plot to it. All it does is it literally follows these kids learning magic, training, and everything, but there's no overarching villain. There's stuff that's hinted at, but it isn't really truly resolved. So there isn't just... It just basically is a book that exists to, like, as an extension of this world, which if you're a fan of this world, like, I completely understand why you would read this book and get it, but for somebody like me who does not know how magic works in this book, in this universe, which isn't explained in this book, everything was kind of confusing and yeah, kind of boring. The final book I read for the month of July was The Girl Who Takes an Eye for an Eye by David Lagercrantz. I'm sorry, I'm butchering his name. But this book is the 5th book in the Millennium series, aka The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo books, and this book series is kind of weird because the original author, Stieg Larsson, he died after the publication of the 3rd book, so the past 2 books, including this, have been published by a completely another author, and it really does show, because in my opinion, these past 2 books have been not as good as the first 3, because the first 3 books I read like maybe 4 or 5 years ago, but I remember exactly what happened in those 3 books, and I really loved them, and this book, like, was not fun to read. Like, Elizabeth Slander to me is such a badass character, and these past 2 books written by David Lagercrantz, this isn't really his fault because these aren't necessarily his characters to begin with, so of course he's not going to write them true to form as the original author would, but he does not do them justice, and the story in these 2 books isn't as intriguing to me as the original trilogy was. There's no overarching theme or villain, and I just didn't like it. I really don't like this book, especially this one. This book was not good. And I, like, recently finished this, maybe, like, a week and a half ago, and honestly, like, it's already leaving me. I couldn't really tell you much about it, and it's a shame, because these books are really good. I feel like this entire book series is a mess now, and I'm not going to continue it, because I know they're coming out with another book next year. So, yeah. And overall, it was a productive reading month. I did read 7 books, but overall, this was a mixed bag of books, because I didn't really care for most of them. So yeah, thank you so much for watching this video. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed it, and thanks. I'll see you in my next one.